Okay, good morning. We are now in the class using Brother Teal's class notes. In the last couple of classes, I have been going through my favorite suttas, my three favorite suttas in each of the Nikayas. And we're about to go into my three favorite suttas, the Buddhika Nikaya, the last of the Nikayas. Now, at the end of last class, Sister Joyce asked a question. She said, how does this stuff relate to the practice? And I said, that's a great idea. I haven't covered that in my slides. So I went home and I added that into my slides. So now you will see more references to how specifically the Mettā Sutta, the Ratana Sutta, these suttas refer to Vipassana practice. And actually, that's why I really like doing the in-person class, is because there's comments and feedback I get, sometimes unintentional, that makes me go back and say, oh, I better change this, change that. So many of my enhancements, if you will, are because of you guys. I don't get that when I'm in Australia. So I'm glad that I can do these classes in person. So let's go to the first sutta, the Mettā Sutta. Just a quick introduction into the history of the Mettā Sutta, the background, the context. 500 monks came to the Buddha for Wasa and said, where can we go to meditate? We want to go and meditate. And so the Buddha said, okay, go to this forest here. So that's the suitable place for you to meditate and make progress. Oh, sorry, quickly, just like last week or last class, I will be handing out copies of the slides, the class notes. Right, so no need to take pictures. You'll be getting the slides this afternoon. So the Buddha said, go to this forest. This is the ideal place for you to meditate. So the 500 monks went to that forest and started meditating. Now, in that particular forest, there were many devas, tree-dwelling devas. And at first, the devas said, oh, great. It's nice that these holy people are coming here to meditate. But then it lasted 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and the devas said, hey, this isn't any good because we cannot rest in a tree above a meditating monk. That would be inappropriate. So the devas started to get frustrated and angry and not liking the fact that there were all these monks meditating in their forest. So they created strange sounds, created visions, and tried to instill fear in the monks. And so all the 500 monks were having problems with their meditation, being disturbed by these spirits, the tree-dwelling spirits. So the 500 monks went back to the Buddha and said, look, you told us to go meditate in that forest, but it's not working. The Buddha said, okay, here is a sutta that you should recite. This is the Mettā Sutta that will calm the devas. It will give you protection against disturbances from the devas. And so the monks, following instructions, went back and recited the Mettā Sutta. With that Mettā Sutta recitation, the devas were extremely happy to have all that metta shared with them and were supported the monks, and the monks made great spiritual progress. So that's the background story according to the commentary. Now, a few years ago, many years ago now, maybe 20 years ago or more, I was listening to a Dhamma talk downstairs at the P.H. Henry Hall. And a monk was talking about metta meditation. And at the end of the talk, any questions? There was a lady in the audience who had heard this story, who had listened to this story about how the Mettā meditation is a protective sutta, protecting against the devas, disturbing monks, and said, I have a problem at work with one of my coworkers. She's always such a nasty person to me. I tried to radiate Mettā to her, and it doesn't work. She hasn't changed at all. And the monk said, no. The purpose of Mettā is not to change her, it's to change you. All right, it's not to change her. Yes, devas can sense your thinking, what's in your mind, but your coworker cannot. So the very powerful effect of radiating Mettā is it's practicing the act of having true loving kindness in one's mind. And I remember my wife and I were in Myanmar for a 1 month Mettā retreat, and the instructions were very simple. They said, start with yourself, if that works for you. Now, some people, the easiest person for them to radiate Mettā to is themselves, but not for me. It doesn't work for me. Just not natural for me to radiate Mettā to myself. I actually envision, this is the next step, envision a teacher. I envision a specific monk who I have huge respect for. It's the chief reverend at Sentul Temple, Reverend Sarankara. To me, he is the embodiment of Mettā, all of my interactions with him. And so I visualize him. I just keep thinking about him, and naturally a feeling of Mettā, of loving kindness, because that's what he represents to me, comes up. Then, once it's firmly established, this strong feeling in the mind of loving kindness, I start extending it to family members. I didn't start with my wife. Okay, notice I didn't start with my wife, because yes, I love my wife, but there's always little things that are going to get in the, issues or things that are going to pop up in the mind. It's much easier to radiate Mettā to this monk or build it up. And then once the momentum is going, start spreading it out to those that are close to me, neutral people, like my fellow yogis around me. And then finally, radiating Mettā to my, quote, enemies, people who I have problems with. And this is what the monk was saying to that lady. If you can really, truly in your heart be radiating Mettā to that coworker who's causing you so many problems, then your heart will be, your view on the situation will change, and that will be helpful for the situation. Okay. So, just one kind of technical comment on the sutta. I mentioned some time ago about all of these scholars who are comparing different versions of suttas, from the Pali version to the Chinese version. And when there is basically the same sutta in both the Pali and the Chinese, which is true for almost all of the suttas. When that is true, that suggests that they all come from a common background, a common source from very early, the early Buddhist teachings, earlier than 250 BC, before the King Ashoka. So it really is an early teaching. However, the Mettā Sutta, it exists in Pali, but there's nothing like it in the Chinese. Okay? So what this suggests to the scholars is that this sutta, in this specific wording, was actually kind of pieced together from Mettā. Obviously there's lots of references to Mettā in the suttas, but this particular verbalization, or this particular sutta was actually built up in Sri Lanka after the Dhamma was introduced. All right, so it may not be the from the earliest Buddhist teachings, but that doesn't really matter to me because the principle is there. So the Mettā Sutta, also known as the Mettā Sutta, is one of the most beloved and widely recited suttas in the Theravada tradition, holding deep significance for both lay people and monastics. Whenever the monks go and chant, almost always they include this sutta. Now it begins with ethical instructions on how one should live and behave. Humble, upright, gentle, content, not proud. The principles that it applies, though the wording of it, like not attached to families, as an example, is aimed at monks. The same principles can be applied to lay people and how we should live our life. So that, and this shows that moral conduct and wholesome attitude prerequisites for genuine loving communities. The heart of the sutta, the instruction to radiate metta to all beings without limit. So after radiating to my quote endings, the next step is just radiate broadly. I like the Pali word, which means pervade, just pervade the whole world with loving kindness, irrespective of all for all beings. Okay, so above, below, across, without hatred or enmity, and this softens the mind. Soft mind, Buddha. It reduces ill will, dosa, establishes mental protection against fear and hostility. Metta is the best protection against any negative dosa base, including envy, jealousy, any type of discomfort, any kind of aversion, fear, anger, worry, all these. Metta is the best antidote. Well, Mettā is a samatha tranquility practice. It prepares the mind for vipassana by calming restlessness and agitation, creating a base of wholesome mental states, and encouraging non-clinging and detachment, especially when practiced with wisdom. When I went to that 1 month retreat, Mettā retreat, the first interview with the Sayadaw, he said, "Why are you here? What is your reason for wanting to be on this 1 month Mettā retreat?" And what I said is, my priority is Vipassana. However, I want to use Mettā to calm my mind, to stabilize my mind, improve my concentration, so that calm, soothed, concentrated mind can then be applied to my Vipassana object. And the monk's reaction was, "Yeah, good." All right. So it really does tie into Vipassana as a preparatory practice. And when we go to on retreat, for example, at KKB, there's always Mettā chanting done at the end of each day during the retreat. And sometimes on retreats, the monk will actually say, "All right, we're going to have an actual Mettā session during our retreat." And the reason is that I talked to a number of Vipassana teachers, and they say, "You know what? These people who are hardcore Vipassana yogis tend to be inward looking all the time. They're always focused inwards. We need to balance that out." And so Mettā meditation balances the inward focus that is typical of Vipassana retreats. Because it's not that this inward focus isn't good, but it needs to be balanced with the external focus as well. In addition, if directly opposes any ill will that develops during the practice, there can be fear or worry or depression. any of those kinds of aversion roots can be directly opposed by Mettā during practice. Some Vipassana retreat centers have added a 9th precept for yogis. Now, you're very familiar with the 5 precepts. There's also the 8 precepts, which is meant for meditators. And then some retreat centers add a 9th precept, Mettā Sahagatena, Suttas, Savakanya, Vesu, Ariva, Yam, Samadhyami. Now, Mettā, loving kindness, Sahagatena is together with, Vipassana is mind, so mind together with Mettā. Some, all, time, breathing things. This is like the first precept. Breathing things, beings. Pariva. Pariva is a beautiful word. It means pervading, diffusing, expanding around. Right? Viharana, residing, living. Samadhyami, committing to making a commitment to do something. So like all our precepts, we always have this samadhyami. The direct translation is, I will live with a heart full of Mettā toward all beings. Okay, before I leave the one, any questions on Mettā?
Maybe let's say myself, right? I'm super big.
Yep.
So the night and night that we do it that we did
Right.
okay, night is very high. So the max I get only 10 minutes. So it is 10 minutes time to really touch stuff. So I only really to myself or just like the highlighter, we should not try it like I already. So I say, okay, family members, friends, then they hear that down. So okay, of like this.
Okay. If you've got just 10 minutes, don't worry about going through all the words of the sutta. You're not going to be able to absorb all that information. If you have time for chanting, normally I do that chanting in the morning when I have time to reflect on every word as my wife and I are reciting it. That's a good time for chanting. However, meditation, whatever brings up that feeling of true loving kindness the fastest. For some people themselves, but don't get hung up on that. For me, it's a very specific monk who, from my experience, has always behaved with Mettā. Whenever anybody has gone with him to him with problems, the way in which he reacts. So that is a person to whom I naturally have these feelings of Mettā. What is important is not the person. What is important is the feeling in your heart. So whichever person, if it's yourself, whether it's a monk or whether it is some other person that naturally brings forth loving kindness, it is having that loving kindness. Then once that is there, what I sometimes do is that I don't have a lot of time, I imagine a family dinner, an extended family dinner, right? Once with the monk, there is Mettā in my heart, true Mettā in my heart. I turn to my wife. May you be well. Then I turn to my son. May you be well. Truly, because it's been built up from the monk. Then to my other son, to my in-laws and so on, my sister-in-law and so on. I mean, basically, I imagine a family gathering. And then that allows me in a very short time to, number one, build up the Mettā, because I start with an individual who brings up that feeling. And then secondly, it's pick very specific people. And to me, my practice has been, I visualize a family meal, or meeting with friends or just a group of people, specific group of people, and then turn to each one of them and see their face, visualize their face. And truly, may you be well, may you be happy. Which words you use are not important, but don't use complicated words. Okay? You use simple words because they come to you from your heart. And in general, I talk about health and mental. Be well, which is health. Be happy, which is mental. Right? You be free from stress. Okay? May you be healthy and free from stress. So whatever words come to me naturally at that time, apply. And sometimes it changes. If it's more natural for you to do it in Chinese, go ahead. It's whatever is in your heart.
Coming to the next question, that
Yep.
there are people like also in this world, they are actually so like maybe they can easily get along. They can be like by all their close friends, people they meet. So is this mean that in the past life they do a lot of metta, or let's say it is me in the past life they actually help people with soul?
It's okay. It is possible because when you meet someone, there's an instant kind of connection, which sometimes positive, sometimes negative, right? And so if somebody instantly has positive connections with many other people, it's quite likely that they have practiced metta. They have embodied those practices themselves, whether in this life or previous life. There's this affinity. Any other questions? Yeah. Mhm.
Why is this?
Okay. Where the Mettā Sutta came from was as a protection from the devas, the local devas, if you will. Right? Now, I remember many years ago, my teenage son was behaving like a teenager. Okay, because he was a teenager. I went to Bante Mahinda and said, what do we do? We went to Bante Mahinda said, make sure that you radiate metta to your household devas. They will appreciate it. And because your son is living under the same house, then when your son is just about to fall asleep or just waking up, or at who knows what time, when the mind is more pliable, the household devas will calm things and make things better. Okay? So I genuinely believe in the power of household devas. And reciting this really was initially intended for household devas, but in this case it was forest tree devas, but it can be applied for household devas as well. So this sutta, this sutta is a protective sutta, a traditional protective sutta, so that the local devas that are right above you, protecting you, are pleased and happy. Okay. Other questions? Okay. The Ratana Sutta. Now, let's talk about the history of this sutta. The city of Masali was having all sorts of problems. There was famine, there was a lot of disease, there was corpses everywhere, and a lot of bad spirits. Everywhere was just a place of everybody was up and getting angry with each other. So there was a lot of physical and emotional problems. The leaders of the city tried all of these offerings and tried to do all this to try and stop it. Nothing worked. So they asked the Buddha to come and help. The Buddha agreed. The Buddha came. As soon as the Buddha came near the city, there was a huge rainfall, washed all the corpses out of the streets. The evil spirits left. Then the Buddha said to Ananda, wander through the streets, sprinkle this water from my alms bowl, okay, and recite this sutta. So the Sri Lankan practice of sprinkling water comes from this sutta. This is the practice where the practice of sprinkling water comes from this sutta. The Buddha then, and the sutta starts out, all you devas. Now, okay, point here, it's addressed to devas. Okay, that's who the Buddha was talking to. That's who the Buddha told Ananda to talk to. All you devas who are here, okay, be well, be happy, and listen carefully. These humans who have been these beings, these people who are been making offerings to you day and night, show metta toward them, and use the word metta. Show metta toward them. Then it goes through listing the power, the qualities of the Buddha, the qualities of the Dhamma, qualities of the Sangha, and saying, by the power of the truth of this statement, may there be peace. Okay? Now, you might wonder, that doesn't sounds a little weird, by the power of the truth of this statement. We don't do that anymore exactly. However, I want to share with you something, just a little something I observed last night. I was at Buddhist Wisdom Center, BWC, and Bhante Sujiva was giving a Dhamma talk. It's kind of funny because he mentioned in the beginning of the Dhamma talk that he initially intended to do a simple Dhamma talk, but he realized he cannot do simple. That's not his strength. He said one time he tried to write a book for children. He gave up. It's just too difficult for him. Because whenever he talks, it always goes into deep Vipassana meditation topics. Right? So if you ever listen to Bhante Sujiva's talks, they may start out light, but they go heavy. And this particular talk was no different. And he was talking about papancha, mental proliferation, where the mind just spreads out everywhere. Now, normally, papancha is associated with perception. However, Bhante Sujiva was linking it to delusion and how delusion suffuses through papancha. And it was he was making some really solid points that serious meditators were appreciating. And I could see people in the audience, other people in the audience, who I knew were serious meditators. They could understand, they could relate. This spoke to them. The truth, the deep truth of what Bhante was saying had a big impact on them. So too, this saying, by the truth of this statement, okay, Devas, what I'm saying about the Buddha is true. You know it's true. And by the truth of this statement, may there be peace. So this whole idea of calling on a truth of a statement to have an impact, though we don't do that practice anymore, it still works psychologically. So originally delivered during famine and unrest in Vipassana, the sutta was taught by the Buddha, recited by Venerable Ananda to bring relief to the afflicted city. So established its traditional roles of protective chant, avoiding danger, restoring peace and health, safeguarding households and communities. It extols the extreme qualities of the Buddha as the fully awakened one. The Dhamma is the path of liberation, especially Nibbana, Supramundane payments, and the Sangha will realize this fact in his group. Each verse affirms there is no equal to this jewel. By this truth may there be well-being. This repeated truth affirmation is a key feature of the power of the sutta. Reciting or hearing Ratana Sutta strengthens faith in Triple Gem, deepens devotion, and encourages taking refuge not in external rituals or omens, but in wisdom and realization of the noble ones. So I'm going to say again, we talked about reciting the Mettā Sutta. Reciting the Mettā Sutta, even if you have a memorized in Pali, that's not powerful. What's powerful is what's in your heart. The words are not powerful. Those are external. The ritual is not powerful. It's what's in your heart. That's where the power is. So it's not about long-term memory, but it reinforces the core values of insight practice such as faith. The sutta also depicts arhatship, the fruits of insight, abandonment of feathers, that noting practices aims to realize. By honoring the Triple Gem as precious treasures, Ratana Sutta keeps the yogi aligned, taking refuge, and inspires determination. So we always take refuge during retreats. And here's how the three refuges, why they're important during Vipassana. The refuge of the Buddha, for me, it gives inspiration. Now, when I look at the big Buddha statue in the meditation hall, I know that that is just simply a piece of marble, or it's not special or unique. What is special or unique are the qualities of the Buddha that it represents. Actually, at the time, in very early Buddhism, there were no representations of the Buddha at all. It wasn't until the Greeks came in, and about 300-400 years after the Buddha, and started saying, hey, we like this Buddhism. Let's combine these Buddhist ideas with Greek sculpting, because they had beautiful Greek sculpture. The Greeks were very good at sculpting lifelike people. And so that's where our current representation of Buddha Rupa, or the Buddha statue, comes from. It's actually Greek influenced. So the statue is not so important. What's important is it represents inspiration, confidence, and the possibility of awakening. When one sees the Buddha, one truly feels, wow, yes, that represents, it inspires, that is what an enlightened person looks like. And so it protects us as a refuge, because a refuge is a protection against despair, discouragement by inspiring us. The Dhamma, its role in the gospel is clarity, direct experience of phenomenon. When one is noting an object, that is Dhamma. That is a Dhamma. That is a truth. It guards against illusion, conceptual entanglement. So it guards you against getting caught up in concepts and brings you back to the ultimate reality, which is a Dhamma. The Sangha, the teacher, the Sangha, is the embodiment of practice. It's also the internal moral compass. How the monks behave is like an internal moral compass, and it guards against loneliness, wrong association, loss of direction. They become almost, during interviews, monks often people often spill their emotions, get very emotional in front of during the interviews, and the monks are trained and good at calming and just saying, okay, let's focus on the practice, and dealing with a lot of emotional problems in the yogi. So it guards it, loneliness, one association, and loss of direction. Okay, any question on the Ratana Sutta? Yeah.
Well, this is right. That is quite long.
Yeah.
Oh, in I say, and I right. Not there. In the and the budget down.
Right.
I used to stand up school on I'm very tired. But then I explain that very straight on the passion. So in a way, it's good to be challenging part of the ritual.
Okay. Again, you're working, you don't have a lot of time. Focus on taking refuges, but taking refuges properly, not just. Not just blind citation. When you take the Buddha, Gacchami, I think reference in the Buddha, truly think about it. That it can give you the protection. If you truly reflect on and to this, we're going to go into the refuges. All right, in depth. That's the next topic. But so take the refuges seriously, because what I'm concerned about is if you're saying, look at the time here, I don't have time to go through all this whole sutta, your heart's not there. So do something short, the refuges, but do them properly. Don't do them long, do them short, but properly and reflecting. Just like in the Mettā, rather than going to the whole Mettā Sutta, bring up Mettā about whoever causes it to come up. And then for me, the habit that I have is family dinner, and I go through one by one and look at each person, visualize each person in the face and say, may you be well and happy, may you be healthy, may you.
Sorry, but the family maybe when you do call at this difference visualize the face we that.
I'm visualizing. Okay, so I've got a bunch of people that I want to radiate Mettā to, right? I start by building up basically igniting the flame of Mettā in my heart. Once the flame is fully ignited and it's there, of truly wishing health and mental peace, health and peace, then I visualize in my mind the people who are closest to me, my family. Like I visualize turning to my wife, visualize her face, and say, may you be well and happy. Okay? May you be healthy and have peace. Whatever words come up. And then I go to this person who is who I visualize sitting next to her. It's all purely a visualization game, but I just take each person individually and generally express these feelings toward them to spread it out. When you truly feel that they're in your presence. Any other questions? Ratana? Yeah.
In the there's the mental meditation.
Yeah.
Mental.
Yeah.
What about mental action?
Okay. The Mettā in action is a phrase that has been used by a couple of organizations to talk about actually demonstrating compassion and going out and doing social work. Okay? That is a very good action. I mean, that's a good thing. It is not a meditative practice. Here, I'm focusing on the meditative aspect of it. But Mettā in action is more about service, more about charity, more about helping the world, which are not meditative actions.
Which type of in terms of the merits?
Okay. The Buddha, in one sutta, he was talking about the value of merits, what gives the most merit or efficacy. Okay, He started saying, doing dana to just a regular person. Then doing dana to a monk and doing dana to a sotapanna. And each one is 100 times better than the previous one. Doing dana and it keeps going up, dana to the Buddha and the collection of Sangha, right? That is and then is building a monastery, helping to build a monastery, because that's got long-term effect. Dana is only for one night, one meal, right? Helping to build a monastery is even higher dana. Okay? Then much higher merit than that is taking the refuges and the precepts. In other words, individual mental cultivation. Much higher than refuges and precepts is radiating metta, practicing metta meditation for the time it takes to pull a cow's udder when you're milking a cow. Now, I've never milked a cow, I don't know how long that takes, but it's not very long, all right? A short period of radiating metta is much, much higher than refuges and precepts. And then the highest is for one finger snap, Vipassana. Okay, so that dana to individual, dana to a group, then helping build a monastery, all those are danas, great. Then you get into the sila, which is the precepts and refuges. Then bhavana, starting with metta for a short time, and then vipassana for a finger snap. When they talk about for a finger snap, they don't mean just sitting down for a finger snap. They mean truly experiencing vipassana insights for a finger snap. Okay, that's the that's the rate that there's that. Okay. All right. Any other? Now we go to the next sutta, Mangala Sutta. All right. There was a bunch of people who were arguing about what is the luckiest sign, what is the luckiest omen, what is the luckiest good luck charm, and they were comparing hearing a certain sound or seeing a certain color or clouds shaped in a certain way. These people were arguing back and forth and couldn't come to an agreement, having a big debate on this topic. The Devas heard about this, and they started arguing the same topic. So now there's humans started, the Devas arguing, the Devas are having this big discussion about what gives is the luckiest omen. And so one night, a Deva came to the Buddha and said, hey, we've been discussing this. Can you tell us what is the most powerful good luck charm, most powerful mangala or blessing? What is the most powerful? And the Buddha completely turned it around from forget about all that external stuff, about clouds and sounds and things you see or hear, or things that you can touch. No, it's all about what you do in your life. And so he listed out these 38 blessings. Now, we're going to go through each of these blessings later, but he brought it from the lay person, made it relevant to the lay people and said, avoiding fools, associating the wise, started out with those as being fantastic blessings, which are not to do so much with spiritual development, but just simply practical life. This is the kind of advice you give to your kid, right? When they're very small, making sure you associate with the right people. But then as the list gets higher and higher, goes all through more and more, they become more and more spiritual in their orientation. So this sutta begins with Devas asking the Buddha what the true source of blessings, Mangala, implying that auspiciousness lies not in bones, rituals, or superstitions, but in right conduct, wisdom, and purity of heart. So this shifts focus from external reliance, internal development, courage, refuge in the Dhamma. The sutta presents the progressive path, beginning with everyday virtues and ascending to ultimate spiritual attainments. This structure makes the Dhamma accessible to all, because not everyone is ready to commit to Vipassana, whole blossom of Vipassana meditation. You're working, so let's start with the simple stuff. But it shows that the higher blessings are internal and ethical, not external or material. It embraces all aspects of life, including family, social life, respecting parents, supporting spouse and children, ethical livelihood, mental development, such as restraint, mindfulness, wisdom, and spiritual culmination, ending defilements and sorrow. This makes it a practical roadmap of worldly well-being, spiritual liberation. The highest blessing is said to be the unshaken mind that admits the worldly conditions of gain and loss, praise and blame, reflecting the essence of the Noble Eightfold Path. So, the Mangala Sutta provides an ethical and psychological framework that complements noting practice. Many blessings refer to quality useful meditation, things like steadfast in virtue. That cultivates a clean and concentrated mind for insight. You need to have good sila, good virtue to practice Vipassana properly. Other blessings, such as listening to the Dhamma, so learning about the Dhamma, reflecting on the Dhamma, that supports understanding of what one knows. Final verses, such as unshaken by worldly conditions, they stress equanimity, and yogis can reflect on this line, remember themselves to remind themselves to maintain balance while noting pleasant and unpleasant experiences. So this is the list, and we're going to go through all these later. They start with very simple, practical daily life needs. And these are the mundane, the category of mundane worldly blessings. They move to the moral, spiritual cultivation, basically spiritual development, starting into a noble way of life, and then finally the ultimate blessings, things like unshaken by worldly conditions, no sorrow, purity and security. Security here means security against us. So all three suttas converge on core insight principles, portraying the path's goal in similar terms and express virtues that support yoga. They don't necessarily, they're not like the Abhidhamma Sutta where it talks specifically about meditation practice, but it's all about laying the groundwork, the framework, or the foundation for the practice. The Mangala and Ratana Sutta emphasize the direct fruits of insight, the perception of the Four Noble Truths, and the realization of Nirvana as the ultimate blessing. The Ratana's depiction of arahats as going out like a flame. This is talking about the passing of an arahat. When a flame is extinguished, you can't say that it died. It just is no more source. There's no more fuel for it to go. No further rebirth mirrors the Mettā Sutta's promise of never lying again. The suttas do not prescribe noting, but create the climate for it. Okay. Before we start on the refuges, any questions on this? So again, I want to thank Sister Joy. She really brought in a lot of value by suggesting linking these three sutras to Vipassana, because they are very important. Right, going on to refuges. The Pali word sarana means refuge, immediate shelter, protection from danger or trouble. Could be a place, a person, or a directive that provides protection. Just a little bit of historical context. At the time of the Buddha, people would take refuge in their king or their lord. And the idea is they're swearing loyalty to that king or that lord, and in return, that king or that lord is going to provide protection against enemies coming in. Okay, so so this was kind of like the context in which this was first generated. It is a foundational commitment for all Buddhists. It means taking the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha as our guide and shelter amidst life difficulties. Going to refuge is a decision to base our life on walking the path to liberation. Reflect on this rather than recite it blindly.